Welcome to Earth Mysteries. Today we're going to the east side of Turkey near the Syrian border to the province of Sanlufa, high up in the limestone plateau, and we're going to go into this place called Göbekli Tepe, which was one of the very first places of archaeological interest that was found in this area, and now it's been understood this is only a very small area that has now been excavated. There's masses of wonderful archaeological knowledge here. And these sites are some 12,000 years old, so much older than Stonehenge or any of these areas. So who were these people? And I think that's the question of, were these people hunter-gatherers? Were they travelers? And why did they create these magnificent circles of stone, these pillars? And what did the depictions on the pillars really mean? Now, much is being spoken about this, and when I traveled there in 2022, I discovered that what we were looking at and trying to decipher the whole of the area was one or two pillars. So I have to say, I've came away saying, we can't decide what these people were about or what their religion was or what they believed in by looking at a few pillars. I think this is going to be very exciting. And what's even more exciting is that after about 1,500 years, they covered them all up. So they buried all these magnificent statues, pillars, which you will see have magnificent reliefs on them and pictures, but they carefully buried them. Was that because they felt they had completed their mission at that time? Or was there a disaster and they were protecting them? But we are privileged to be able to see them now. So if you're ready to go, let's go. And this area is called Taztepla, and it's called the land of grand transformation. And I understand why they called it that, because this is just an amazing place to be. And I think that the great work that has been carried on by archaeologists is just to be admired, because all that happened initially was a farmer was annoyed because this big stone in his earth kept breaking his tractor. And so he's like, oh, why does this happen? And of course, when they dug down, they found that the land and all the farmland, there's a lot of farmland there, was covering these amazing sites. So which had been there for 8,000 years, 12,000 years. Had been covered up probably for about 9,000 years. And this area is just a few of the different sites that are there. If you're interested, I have another video on Göbekli Tepe. But all of these other tepes are becoming more and more interesting, and they have this wonderful archaeological museum in Sanlufa, so I think they've done a good job of trying to protect what they have. So why did they build these sites? Well, just to say that the word tepe means a mound or a man-made hill, and many cultures are fascinated by creating a mound representing the pregnant Mother Earth. So the mound itself may be significant as a means of actually saying, there's something wonderful coming up from Mother Earth. But as I say and have seen, that these people who built these were actually hunter-gatherers. And what has really upset the apple cart in the archaeological world is that most people believe that you only built a center or a place of community because you wanted to develop agriculture, because you needed the food. Well, clearly these people were not building these places for food. They were hunter-gatherers. They didn't need to come together in agricultural ways. So some would even say that they had lived in this area up to 16,000 years ago. And that's long before what is known as the Younger Dryas, which is a time where we had a sort of warming up of the Ice Age and then a sudden cooling effect some 12,900 to 11,700 years ago. So this is an amazing event that many archaeologists talk about. But if we're right, these sites were there before and continued afterwards. So even though we would say it was a disaster in some parts of the world, clearly it wasn't in all parts. There's also evidence that Siberia contributed to this migration, which meant that the people were coming in with maybe Siberian ideas, and we know there's a lot of Siberian shamanism, so was that what they were bringing? But there's also evidence that many of the people who had lived there were very local, so it didn't necessarily mean that people brought their wisdom. They already had the wisdom, and they just built these sites from there. So I thank ancient architects for this wonderful image. The name Göbekli Tepe means a pot-belly hill, and this represents the idea that this may be a navel of the world. Now, this idea of being a navel or an umbilicus or an omphalos is found in many other places, such as Cusco is seen as a navel of the world, Delphi is seen as a navel of the world. So the idea that you would build in a place where you felt that the richness of Mother Earth was coming to the surface was not uncommon, but is this really what they were trying to do? We think it was built around 9,900 BC, which is obviously about 11,900 years ago. And really somewhat in the middle of the Younger Dryas. So did they build this as a message to the world? Were they bothered by the Younger Dryas, this sudden cooling that took effect? So again, we don't know. And we understand that Göbekli Tepe consisted of both domestic and ritualistic centers. And again, as I say, it's about 11,000 years old. And the amount that they have excavated is tiny. So even though I'm showing you these different, what they call enclosures, enclosure A, B, C, D, think of this as just one tiny area. Maybe there's 30 more areas like this. And in 2022, when I was there, they put a tarpaulin, a sort of cover over to protect it. I think there was some debate as whether this was a good idea. This has happened quite around the world, to put some sort of cover, but you think, well, if it survived this long. One of the problems was that the pigeons were enjoying going underneath this tarpaulin and settling on these pillars, which have been there for 12,000 years. And obviously, you know what pigeons do. So this is really important. As I say, these are just 5 enclosures within a possible 60 enclosures in the area. And each of the pillars, because that's what we're going to be looking at, were about 18 feet tall. So, weren't small. These were large enclosures, about 6 meters, and totally covered up around 8000 BC. So even though, as you may read in some of the books, that it's believed these enclosures and their pillars represented the sky at night, one of the things I saw when I went there was that these enclosures were actually beneath the hill. So you weren't necessarily seeing an horizon. Again, making me question, why did they build them? And here I've tried to take my own pictures and say, okay, this is what we're seeing, A, B, C, D. Doesn't really matter to you too much. You're just saying, okay, I'm interested in the pillars. But when I'm reading about it and they talk about C or D, I'm trying to get this idea. So you could walk around this walkway as you see. Here again is that image. And one of the interesting things is that as you will see, especially D, it's an eclipse, or ellipse, I should say, an ellipse. And so the idea that it's elliptical suggests that there's more music involved in this. Some people have seen this as a musical center in terms of the vibration hitting against the walls. And there's a lot of sacred geometry and maths that is included in looking at these sites. So as you can only imagine, everybody has measured it from various distances. So if we go to enclosure A, there are a lot of animals, and the question is, well, did each enclosure actually represent a different animal and therefore a different tribe or a group, as we know happens nowadays? So different tribes having different symbolism, different totem animals. And as you can see in enclosure A, we have this lovely pillar, let's see if I can get it larger, which has a bull. And no, I've forgotten what all the images are, but the bull, the fox, and the crane. And the fox appears many times. And it's often thought that these are flying foxes, but the fact of the matter is, were they really just because they had a lot of foxes in those areas? You see the fox here, the crane is below. Or was there some symbolism about these different images? Obviously, the bull or the cow appears at many times through history, often relating, let's say, to the Taurian age. So the age of Taurus had a lot about cows and Hathor and Isis. But what is the fox? So just to remind us that even though we may see the astrological signs as we do, Cancer, Gemini, Leo, whatever, it's only our interpretation. So 12,000 years ago, they probably saw that one of the symbols in the sky looked like a fox. Who knows? This is one thought. Here's another lovely figure. You see the snake. Snakes very commonly are seen in sacred sites. And here we see a lamb underneath it. Again, an idea, a ram, lamb. There's a sheep. So was it because they had sheep, or did that have some symbolism? And here's another, again, good snake image. You see the snakes coming down. There's possibly a serpent underneath that, a Scorpio, I should say, underneath. And they have this, what looks like a belt there. I don't know if you can see it, the snake head's coming down. And then there's what we could say an H-shaped symbol. And some consider that to be related to the idea of hydrogen ions. There's a lot of talk now about hydrogen ions and the bonding between hydrogen ions. Was that what they were trying to symbolize? And was this more of an idea that it might not be that they understood hydrogen ions, but was this idea of something about the serpent being lightning? People have seen it in that way. So something coming down from the heavens, breaking the hydrogen ions open, causing destruction. I think your guess is as good as mine, but it's a fascinating idea. And if you go to someone like Pumapunku in Bolivia, you see these same H-shaped symbols. So just be aware that these symbols are appearing all over the world. Here's a flying fox. I hope you can see that. Again, they love their foxes, so that certainly appeared. And this is in enclosure B. And we move on to enclosure C, which I think has one of the most beautiful images that I just love, which is what they call the predator. And you can see what looks like a boar or a pig underneath. Was this a animal such as a leopard? Was it pussycat? Who knows? But how did that survive all this time? It's beautiful. And now we move on to enclosure C. And here you have ducks and boars. Again, trying to get the picture for you. You can see the ducks and then the boar underneath. Again, you could say, well, this is what was around at that time. But I don't know. Was this trying to show the sky? Why would you spend so much time, that's all I would like to say, in carving these wonderful reliefs or images? Again, is it to do with your tribe? Is that what your tribe was about? A boar and a duck? Who knows? And now, again, here's C, here's a fox. Nice fox. But you see this wonderful central pillar. I think that's amazing. Now we move to enclosure D, where most of the work has been done. And people like Andrew Collins has talked about that this is symbolizing the sky at that time. You see underneath here you can see the scorpion. So they say, well, that's Scorpio. So then you say, well, okay, the next stage must be Sagittarius. And the concept that ball is seen to be the one that has, the ball is your soul that is being released. Sagittarius is taking it up to the sky. But I was fascinated, and I'm not sure if you can see this, by that webbing, first of all, that sort of chevron shape, but it also seems to be on the back of the crane. And of course, I pointed that out, wasn't necessarily received with much joy. But there's a lot of figures there that I think can't just be looking only at one or two figures to say, I understand this whole symbolism. And then you have what we call the man bags. And between each of those man bags, and I don't think I can get my picture sharper, are animals. And so it's been seen, well, were they trying to say there are 3 phases of the moon, or maybe it's the 3 seasons? What did the animals represent? There is also thought that these so-called man bags, which again are found throughout the world, represent a way of holding energy. So you often see it in a Sumerian image where they're holding a bag, and we think now that that's sort of the energy supply they needed in order to come onto Earth. But that doesn't necessarily fit into this picture, which really was more about people being on Earth at this time. We don't know. And here it is. And when I got there, this image that I'm showing you, this is it. So I was like, wow, it's partially hidden. It's got lots of other things going on. And because the sun was shining on it at that time, it was really hard to see the imagery. But it was very different from the image in the middle where they tried to show me what I was supposed to be looking at. So this is the story. And I hope you've enjoyed this journey. And really what I'm wanting to say to you is think about traveling there. Of course, they have had a terrible earthquake, and I want to just honor everybody whose lives were lost and the many who are suffering still from that. But this is going to be a very exciting place that opens up. It is exciting also because of its links to history. So it's very close to some of the major rivers that run through this area that we read about in the Bible. So this has always been a very biblical, it's said to be the place where Abraham was born. So were these people, even though Abraham was relatively recent, did they go to these places because of the ancestors who'd been there long, long before? I hope you enjoyed this journey. Watch this space, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye now.